All right, everyone, welcome back to Otherworldly Encounters with Mike and Brian. Brian, I have some great news, man.
Hit me.
We got our first fan letter.
Yes.
You want me to read it?
I would love to hear it.
All right. So this letter is from Tyler. It says, "Hey, Mike and Brian, I wanted to let you both know how much I enjoyed your recent podcast on Bob Lazar. Given the fascinating nature of the Bob Lazar episode, I was wondering if there might be any chance of you two doing a podcast on the Travis Walton abduction. I look forward to hearing both of your opinions on this event. Thank you, Tyler. P.S. I have my garage beer on standby."
This guy, shout out Tyler.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate the mail, man. Thanks
That's
for
awesome.
listening.
That's awesome. Yes. All right. So, Tyler, we're going to do it, brother. All right. So, Brian really doesn't know this yet, other than just from the letter, but we are going to do a little episode on Travis Walton. So, here's the deal. Brian knows very little or a little bit about Travis Walton. I knew absolutely nothing about him, so I did all the research I could on this one. So, we're going to kind of flip the script. I'm going to give what facts I could find about this whole abduction, okay, and this will give you an opportunity as a believer in alien stuff, to weigh in.
All right. I like it. Let's flip the script.
All right, listeners, we're going to talk about Travis Walton. If you don't, and I'm going to kind of get into some of the back history, some of the specifics, some of the, just to give us a true timeline of when this occurred. So basically, Travis Walton was 22 years old. He lived in Arizona in a place called, wait for it, Snowflake. All right, Snowflake, Arizona. And he worked in like the forest industry, right? Basically, I would call him a logger, but really what they were going to do out there was clearing underbrush and probably dead trees and stuff like that, right? So Travis Walton and his future brother-in-law, or his best friend, Mike Rogers, were working together, but on this team, so there was a total of 7 of them, right, including Travis. So then there's 6 others. You got Mike Rogers, who was the foreman. You got John Giletti, Steve Pierce, Dwayne Smith, Kenny Peterson, and Alan Dallas. All right, so some funny backstory, not really funny backstory, but just interesting. So Travis was actually dating Mike Rogers' sister, or Dana, all right? But then John Giletti, I believe is how you say his last name, that was Mike's brother-in-law, all right? So they were fairly close, right? They were friends. I mean, they may not have been best friends, but they worked enough together. They were close, obviously, in the forestry industry. So back on November 5th, 1975, these guys were out in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest near Heber, Arizona. All right, so they acquired a government contract to go out and clear. It was anywhere from like 12 to 1,500 acres. All right, for 7 dudes. That's a big undertaking right there. That's a lot of logging. So on the night of November 5th, they got done, they were leaving, and they were driving down a logging road or a dirt road. When in the distance they saw an object hovering, but also producing light, okay? So they just kept driving towards it, and then once they got close enough, they obviously were trying to stop. But before the vehicle even stopped, from what I've been reading, Travis just hops out and just immediately starts walking towards the light, which I don't know who in their right mind would actually do that, but, to each their own. So everybody in the truck's yelling at Travis, "Hey, get back in here. We want to take off," right? So Travis then hid or ducked down behind some brush. And it appeared that the spaceship or saucer was starting to leave. So then he stood up. But when he stood up, that's when he got blasted in the chest with some type of light.
And I think, just real quick, because I thought it was interesting, because I do know a little bit about this, and I've heard Travis talk about this in a few different platforms. One of the things I thought was interesting, so from a distance perspective, and Mike, you tell me if I'm correct or not, the truck pulls up, they're about 60 feet from this craft. Travis gets up, walks up, ducks down, realizes, oh shit, I should probably get back in the truck, gets up, and at this point, according to Travis, he's probably 8 to 10 feet away. I just think mentally that is an image to burn into your mind as we talk about this story, 8 to 10 feet from this craft.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were close, right?
Super close.
And so you can understand the panic from the dudes in their truck. They're just like, hey, get your fucking ass back over here. This isn't safe. We want to get out, right? This is not normal. So once Travis goes to stand up, that's when, you know, if you listen to a podcast he's on, he said the light was kind of like a goldish, whatever light, right? Mm-hmm. So he gets hit with this light in the chest, and according to one of the 6 guys, it blasted him back 15 feet, all right? At that moment, that's when the dudes in the truck threw it in reverse and just took off. But what was interesting is one of the guys in the truck described the light as a bluish-greenish, blue-green light, which contradicts Travis, right? So that was just kind of like my first, like, light is light. I think you would, you know, if 7 of us were standing there, we'd all have...
I mean, the guy could have been colorblind. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Crazy situation. Everyone's panicked. Maybe he's a little colorblind. Sure.
All right, let's go with it. All right, so blew back 15 feet. Then the dudes in the truck, the other 6 crew members, they got about a quarter mile to a half mile down the road, stopped, got in an argument or a heated discussion on whether or not they should go back and get Travis. Well, while they're all standing there, they see this light go from the ground into the sky and disappear. So at that moment, they're like, okay, let's just go back because obviously it must be safe. So they go back there and they can't find Travis.
It's safe for everyone except Travis.
Exactly, right? Yeah, they're like, yeah, I'm good. You good? Yeah, we're good, right?
Yeah.
All right, so at this moment, they go back and they do the best search that they possibly can. From my understanding, they don't have any flashlights. It's dark, right? Mm-hmm. So they turn around and head back to town. When they get to town, in the days of the old payphone, they were able to call the sheriff's department, which was the Navajo Sheriff's Office. All right?
Okay.
So the Navajo Sheriff's Office, or deputy, I think there was one at a time, it might have been 2, shows up. And so these guys are telling this guy, this deputy, this story. Well, of course he thinks it's bullshit.
100% chance you guys killed that man and hid the body in the woods.
Yeah, right? Yeah. But then he started doing what, normal police officers do. Have you been drinking tonight? Have you been smoking marijuana, snorting, cocaine? Are you on any type of illicit drug?
Yeah.
All right. So once the deputy is like, okay, well, obviously these guys appear to be sober. Mm-hmm. He told Mike, all right, so he's the foreman, I'm taking you and you pick 2 others. We're going back out. The other dudes are going back to town and they're not leaving. All right. So Mike, Alan, and Kenny go with the deputy back out. All right. So they go out there. Obviously, they're showing the deputy where it took place. The deputies they're all searching around for Travis. They can't find Travis. But in the meantime, the deputy notes, well, I didn't see any scorch marks. I didn't see any scratch marks. I didn't see anything that would lead me to believe like there was this huge bright light, or that there was even like a craft or anything that was able to land in that general area. All right, so they looked, like I say, they just basically did some cursory searches until, basically it was, I think at the time it was just kind of like to appease the guys, like calm them down a little bit, like, okay, we're out here looking, knowing you ain't gonna be able to find shit. Yep. So they call the search off that night, and they wait till daylight. So then the next day, they informed, obviously, his family that he was abducted. But the mom had an unusual response to that. She was like, when her other son called, all her response was, "They got him." Well, they got him. Like, he was supposed to know who they were, right? So that made me wonder. So I did some research. They were actually avid, like, UFO, like, not really researchers, but they were just into it, right? So her response now makes sense, because if they were into it, like, and someone calls and says, "Hey, you're abducted," because, like, if your wife was to call me and say, "Hey, Brian got abducted," I'm like, all right.
Checks.
Yep. Makes sense, because he probably was dumbass, put himself in that position, right?
100%.
All right. So they go, so it tells the mom and his other brother, and they go out and start searching. Well, the search party, from what I saw, was like about 200 people. But then all these, like, weird people started showing up, like these out-of-towners, like dudes in unmarked black vehicles with black matching rims, and they're getting out in suits like Men in Black, right? Okay. So the theory is behind that is it was the actual government out there. They're agents of some sort, but they weren't FBI, they weren't CIA. It was like, so now the conspiracy is, does the government actually have a department that is designed and is super secret that just investigates alien encounters? And it's not the Men in Black.
Isn't that interesting? Because, we're here in 2024, and the story of the year last year, and something we're going to have to talk about in one of these episodes is David Grush and his testimony to Congress about that exact group and what they do and how it exists, but there's no payroll. But that's another episode. So
definitely another episode. All right. So during all, like I say, all these searches, they got canines, they've got aerial searches, and there's absolutely zero sign that this event took place. Now, the one thing that someone did have is they did get a spike on a radiation, like galvanometer type thing, radiation. So there was, when they took that out there, they did get a spike on it, but that was like the only thing that they had at that time that maybe something did happen. All right. So now we're going to fast forward 5 days. All right. November 10th, Travis shows up on the side of a road, laying in the road, looks up, you can see the saucer hovering there, takes off. All right. So he walks X amount of miles. He sees some lights, notices this, familiar with the city, goes there, makes a collect phone call. Now, this is important to the story. Makes a collect phone call to his sister.
Okay.
But her husband answered. All right. Basically, they go and pick him up. They didn't tell the sheriff's office that they had found him. Okay. Kind of weird, right? You've spent the last 5 days, search party, dude shows up, but you're not going to call the police first thing.
Maybe you just go grab him and we'll notify him after we pick him up. Where did Travis show up? Because if memory serves me correct, I think Travis showed up like multiple miles away from where the alleged abduction actually took place. Do you happen to know what that was?
I forgot to write down the town name, but you are true. I believe it was like anywhere from 15, 20 miles away from where he was found, where he was dumped on the side of the road. I don't know the exact distance of how far it was from the actual event. But that phone call is going to be important here in a little bit.
Okay.
So Travis gets back home. Now, the thing was, like, they didn't want, from the family side up, from what I read, is basically they were just wanting him to take some deep breaths, right? They probably knew that he was just going to get hounded by law enforcement and have to answer all these questions, but they didn't. Maybe the family just didn't want him to have to go through that right then, right? Okay, cool. I can get down with that. Well, they then contacted APRO.
I don't know what APRO is.
It's the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. They are solely dedicated to researching alien sightings and encounters. Okay,
all right.
But it's pretty legit, actually. They have like physicians, they have people who specializes in certain things, etc. Right?
Okay.
So, sheriff's office, from my understanding, still doesn't know this guy's here. But then, in the cover of darkness, these people come pick him up, take him to a hotel in a different state, I believe. Gave him a false name to check in under. And basically, these doctors was looking at him and like covering, like looking over his body in a separate hotel room.
Where did they put the probe, Travis?
Exactly. Where did they put it? So they did blood work. It sounded like they did a complete medical workup.
Okay.
Right. But everything, from my understanding, came back normal.
Okay.
But but they get back, and all of a sudden there's like reporters, but more reporters than normal, like reporters from Japan and shit, right? Well, back when he was using that payphone, you still had an operator that was plugging in, you know?
Yep.
Well, she listened to the conversation, and when he said his name, it rung a bell, and she leaked it to the media. So that's how, like, it got so famous so quick. Other than, you know, six other dudes are claiming some guy got, you know.
A lot of corroboration there, if they're all telling the truth.
Yeah. So, anywho, that's how it got in the media. That's why I said it was kind of an important piece of this, is how it got out and ended up becoming so famous across the country. Mm-hmm. But going back to the six guys, obviously, when they were doing the investigation on trying to find Travis before Travis even came back, they thought these guys murdered him, right? They murdered Travis, and they hid his body somewhere out in the woods. So when they're out there on these search parties, like the deputies are out there basically just like scolding them, right? Like they're doing like an field interrogation. Like, where's his body? We can all go home if you just take us over to where you buried him, etc., right? Well, then they all agreed to do a polygraph or lie detector. Well, they all passed it, right? Now, that's the part that I was like, okay, I understand the polygraphs are not admissible in court. They are, I would say, subjective to the polygraph technician. Like, if you're an examiner, how you read and interpret the results might be different from me, right? But to have the same guy do all 6 tests and they all pass,
the guy had to be consistently bad, or they were all telling the truth.
I think maybe up to that point, maybe that is truthful. Maybe there was like the big bright light of some sort, and they saw him get knocked down. They saw something hovering over the road.
Yep.
And they all passed. I mean, either they're all 6 really, really good liars, or maybe there is some truth behind it.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that so far?
This part isn't even something to really, I don't think, debate in my mind. I think where Travis gets hairy for me, and the reason that I am skeptical on Travis, is this occurred in 1975. I didn't know about the leak from the phone operator. That's interesting. So that helps get some media attention. 1978, Travis writes a book on the incident, which, okay, social media doesn't exist. You want to get it out there. That's cool. Then 1993, the movie Fire in the Sky is released, which is an adaptation of Travis Walton's entire story. And I can remember being a kid and watching that movie, and when Travis wakes up in the craft and how it's depicted in the movie, I was terrified. I was like, I was 100% positive aliens were just here to abduct us, cut us up, throw us back on the field, and move on. And I was like, this is terrifying if this is accurate. Now, it turns out, according to Travis, that they fictionalized his actual experience on the craft. And we'll get into some of those things. But I think to your question, the lead up to this, 6 dudes saw the same thing. They passed the lie detector test. It's a little funky for me that Travis calls from a phone booth. They don't notify anyone. They pick him up, and it feels like there's a lot of swirly, fishy business there. But, whatever. I don't really care. I think the meat and potatoes of this is Travis's description of what happens aboard this craft.
Well, actually, you bring up a good point. It's something I was meaning to talk about, but I kind of forgot. So, because you're basically saying that this could be potentially because of money, right? Because there's a lot of things that he's done, but also what I found was in October of that same year, Mike, the foreman, he's the one that won that government contract for the forestry removal, right?
Okay.
But he also wrote a letter to them saying that he wasn't sure the job was going to get done because of manpower issues, they're working late hours, whatever. Because, think about it, 1,500 acres for 6 dudes, that's a lot, right? So if they didn't complete it on time, they would have been, I think it was like a $2,500 fine, and then they wouldn't be able to bid on government contracts any further. So
you're telling me there was a government contract that was over on time and over budget? So far, I'm shocked.
Right. But, yeah, I get it. But to your point that maybe there was some money initially. You get to think about that. You got to add it in. It's kind of suspicious.
Yep.
Especially
if you're independent contractors.
Right. Maybe it's just coincidence, right? We'll just say it's coincidence. Timing sucked. The spaceship should have came, 3 months later type thing.
Yep.
All right. So getting back into Travis. So he goes through all of his testings or whatever. He gets back to town. Obviously, the sheriff's department's a little pissed off because why the fuck didn't you tell us you're in town, man? Right? Yeah. You're having all these other people like examining you and everything else, and we're the last ones that we spent all these man hours the last 5 days looking for you. But I will say when they picked Travis up, he did make a comment that he felt he was only gone for a couple hours, but it was 5 days, right? And when his brother had mentioned that he had like a 5-day shadow, right, where he hadn't shaved and everything else. So that raises the question, is time different? If you're talking about these spaceships, space shuttles, however you want to say it, wherever they're at, is time different?
It's an interesting question.
Is it just slower there? Or are they able to manipulate time and space? And it's just, but here on Earth, we're just spinning around circles and...
Well, it's interesting. We know factually right now, based on our ability to tell time, that if you increase speed, a great example is if you're in a commercial airline flying the same direction that the world is spinning, time for you will be slightly slower than what it is on Earth because of the reduction in gravity. It was one of Einstein's theories. So it's interesting. We can prove that you can slow down time, but we can't say that, so call that moving forward in time, I guess. But there's no way to go back in time. So interesting little wormhole again for a discussion at a different time. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's interesting. Time distortion.
Yeah. All right. So now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes. All right. So the discussion of now he's on the spacecraft.
So can I just, before we even get into this, because Travis Walton, this dude just bothers me for some reason. Every time I've heard him tell a story, and the reason, and this is actually perfect that I interjected and kind of cut off the beginning of your story, because every time I hear Travis Walton tell this story, as he goes throughout the story, stops to reflect on his feelings and emotions related to the story. And at some point, you're just like, dude, just tell me the story, and then we'll talk about segments after the end. But give me the start to finish of the story. And he never does that. And if I think about someone that's like a pathological liar, if I tell you a portion of a story and then I stop to offshoot something and give you my thoughts or feelings, usually when I do that, I could be materializing whatever I want the next portion of my story to sound like. And that's, to me, what it feels like Travis Walton is doing when I visually watch him talk and tell the story.
Well, you can also internalize somebody else's story and make it your own, right? So this guy, if he really was into a lot of UFO stuff, and supposedly like there's they just released some type of like alien show the week prior, that they were watching.
It was the movie, and I don't remember the name, but it was the movie about Betty and Barney Hill.
Yes, yeah. That's who it was.
I remember the name of the movie.
I remember those two names. Yes. So he just recently, coincidentally watched that a week prior. Then you got the potential loss of contract and fine money, and then all of a sudden he disappears.
So how many, just in general here, how many coincidences do you have to have during the course of the story where it's like 3 strikes and you're out?
At least 25.
Okay, well, we've only got 2, so we've got a ways to go. All right, just checking.
That is a great question, though. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Maybe one of our listeners can tell us how many coincidences.
Right, that'd be a good write-in.
It would be a great write-in. All right, so again, they found him on the roadway. He couldn't comprehend that what he described as a brief incident that had actually been 5 days. All right, so we got that part right. And then he says, like, when he's talking to the investigators, he just had an impulse to get out of the truck and walk towards the craft. Like, okay, so to me, if you have an impulse to do that, one, you're just a very curious person. But if you think of the other coincidence prior to that, I think he was wanting to get abducted.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know. I don't know why you would do that, but people are built different, right? Like the fight or fright.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. But he does describe, like, when he was standing there, there was like the ground was rumbling a little bit. And then one of the guys in the truck did say, like, they felt the rumbling, which very well could be if there's something hovering above. And then it got louder as it started to rise. It got louder, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because it needs more thrust, more power, so of course it's going to get louder. But then that's when he said that he got hit with that light. All right, and that's when other guys left. Then that's when he's brought onto the craft. So he gets brought on the craft. He's laying on the craft. He's laying on the table, and he thinks he's at like a doctor's office until his eyes isn't as fuzzy as they were. He starts to wake up and he sees these 3 aliens.
Described as like the quintessential alien, right? Big head, big eyes.
No facial.
Yeah, just like blank.
But all right, so we're going to go back to like what he said on Rogan. And it actually made me think a little bit, because it kind of does make sense, right? Because, we talk about they didn't have any facial expressions. They didn't talk to one another. But if they can read minds, they can read each other's thoughts. It takes out, because you're always going to be truthful, right? If you're reading my mind, you're knowing exactly what I'm saying, and there's no like him hawing around about it.
Well, if anyone can read my mind, I apologize in advance.
Yeah, no shit. And so to me that makes sense. Like, why would you need any emotion, right? Why do I need to show you emotion if you already know I'm happy? Why do I need to show you I'm scared if you're reading my mind, I'm scared?
It makes a lot of sense as like a biological evolution, because if you take out your need to make facial gestures in any manner, then you're reducing the amount of muscles you're using, which reduces the amount of energy you need to just sustain for your day. So like as an evolutionary feature, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it does make a lot of sense. All right, so he's laying on his back where he thought he was in a hospital bed. He sees the 3 aliens, and to your point, described them just like you would see in the movies. But he was able to get up, and he found like some type of cylinder, stick, something.
Yeah, he said it was a clear cylinder.
Yeah, some sort, and basically he started swinging at these aliens. And then this is the part that kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. All right, so he described this guy, and I'm hoping I'm being somewhat accurate to this.
So the aliens back off. This door opens, and here's this being.
Yeah, a bigger alien that looks, to what he said, like a human. The only difference was he's wearing like a glass fishbowl or something over his head.
Right.
Which, again, to your point, is a classic 1970s alien movie, Alien Invaders type.
Yeah, 100%. And I do remember Travis saying that this being had some musculature to him. It wasn't like the thin, no muscle aliens that were over him. This being looked like he was kind of built.
Yeah, which then we can go down another rabbit hole is, are there really aliens walking around on Earth right now just disguised as humans? But that's for a different day. So then this bigger alien, human-like alien, escorts him out of, let's just say it called a lab, or wherever he was initially laying. And it was from, if I remember right, it was like, he said it was a bigger room, but inside of that bigger room were more aliens that looked just like the guy that pulled him out. However, the only difference was there was also females, but they all looked human. And they put him on a table, and he said they put a mask on his face. He doesn't remember seeing any hoses or anything like that. But that was the last thing he remembered until he woke up on the side of the road. So this, to me, is where it kind of is like sketchy. And I don't know, like, if we knew aliens were walking around here right now, like this scenario, I'd be like, okay, yeah, it probably happened, right? I can see it. But being we don't know, man, this part right here is what gets me.
So even taking a step back, right? In episode 1, we talked about Bob Lazar and Bob Lazar's description of what he experienced and saw and some of these different things. And let's just say for a minute that we believe Bob and we're not sure about Travis. The one thing that Bob had said when he saw the test flight the first time was that the craft lifted off the ground silently. Like, you wouldn't have even known that it was lifting off except for the fact that it was wobbly closer to the ground, which Bob wrote off to the propulsion system. But with the Travis story, there's this vibration and then this, I think it was a loud noise, right?
Yeah, it was a vibration and the noise. As it started to take off, it got louder.
Yeah, so not saying that there couldn't be different species, but interesting that there's kind of a departure in stories from how a craft operates between the two.
Well, I mean, he has admitted that he's seen other UFOs either prior to that event or since that event. Mm-hmm. And one was a triangle. I think he said one was a square, and one was like a saucer type. But the one story he said about, like, with the triangle one is him and his girlfriend at the time, and she worked for that Los Alamos, right? Mm-hmm. And they were driving down the road. They had just left LA or something like that, and they're driving back to Arizona. And they see a light coming at them, but at a speed in which they knew it was faster than an airplane. And then it got to them and hovered over top of them, and that's when you could see the 3 lights on each end of the triangle, or point of the triangle. And he said it basically made like a 180 turn and then just disappeared, like shot up or wherever it went and disappeared.
Yep.
But again, his girlfriend was able to look out the back window up, which is kind of suspicious. And like, why is he driving her in the back seat? Or maybe they had somebody else with him. Maybe his son was with him. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming there was probably a third person in the car. Mm-hmm. But so that he's had other sightings other than him being abducted. But like, the thing is, man, the thing with him on the saucer or the alien ship, there's so little information that he's able to produce that it just sounds like bullshit. And I don't want to not believe this guy, because when you watch him, like if you watch Rogan's podcast, like you can tell that he has some type of emotional damage from this experience. And you have to be a very, very good actor to fake that type of response. So that like makes me want to believe, but again, the details are just so.
Let me give you the counter to that one, because if let's just say that Travis Walton and his friends manufactured the entirety of this story, so it would have went from maybe the local news will pick it up to, oh man, like national news is picking this up. Boy, we might have lied a little too far, and now you've had to manufacture this story so many times that the human mind is 100% susceptible to, if you lie repeatedly time and time again, even if it is a lie, your brain's going to tell you that that's factual because you've been telling the story that way for so long. So is it he has PTSD from the event, or he has PTSD because he manufactured a story and he's been having to lie for, almost 50 years at this point?
Well, I don't think the line would cause PTSD. I think it would cause a lot of anxiety, right? I can see where he'd be very anxious. And the other thing that really bothered me too about watching that podcast is when I talk to somebody, like I'm looking at the way your body language and your eye contact and stuff like that, right? Like looking away occasionally, like when you're trying to think or if you're trying to lie is one thing, but to like constantly be looking down at the ground and not really engaging with the other host, to me for me that's like you're hiding something. Like I don't want to look at you. Okay, one of two things, I guess. Either if I look at you, I don't want you to make me feel like you don't believe me, because that will like hurt my feelings, right? Because if this actually did happen, I've been living my entire life with people constantly telling me that I'm a fraud when it actually did happen. Or he doesn't want to look at him because he knows that he has a human lie detector across from him, and he'll call it bullshit where he sees it. So I can see it going either way.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty far-fetched fucking story.
I just here's the thing for me with this Travis Walton story. There are so many wild UFO stories out there. There are millions of people all over the world that have seen these UFOs. And I've read enough of the stories to be able to say, probably 90% of what I've read is total bullshit. I just don't believe what you say. But there's that 10% that I'm like, there's enough things that say, maybe this isn't 100% true, but maybe there's some realities to this. And that's kind of the Travis Walton scenario that we're talking about. Bob Lazar, we could at least corroborate element 115, some of the flight characteristics of the UFO that Bob described. Okay, we can pull some points together, but with the Travis Walton story, outside of the lie detector, which is a subjective test, and I think you have to get annually evaluated to be even performing the test, outside of that piece of evidence, which is kind of loose evidence, it's really just a story that Travis is telling. There's no physical thing I can put in my hand. There's no marks on Travis that I can mark back to the UFO, abduction. Now, according to Travis, somebody's taken core samples of the tree, and where the trees were facing the UFO, apparently the growth rings are bigger on that side. I don't know. I struggle with that one, because if that's the case, I feel like that would have inflicted cancer on all of those guys, and they would have some terrible growths, almost like a Chernobyl type of incident.
At least skin cancer.
Just something. So for Travis, it's just a story.
Yeah. You brought up a point, and I'm trying to think about this one for a minute. I'm getting lost in my thoughts. But so talking about Bob Lazar, right? So there's one thing that just came to my mind while you're describing the difference between Bob Lazar and Travis. One main thing that I think about is the way that the government or whoever tried to ruin Bob Lazar's life. All right. So if you look at Travis, I don't see any government agency going to them saying, hey, here's video or audio of your wife cheating on you. No one erased any of his educational background or any places of employment that I know of. Now, maybe I'm wrong there, I don't know, but I don't see him being scrutinized by the government as much as what Bob Lazar was. So to me, if you compare the two, which to me, they're apples and oranges, I would say, because you asked me before, like my thoughts on Bob Lazar, looking at this case compared to Bob Lazar, like Bob Lazar is like 100% real in my mind, right? This one, you just look at all these different things where government agencies, what they do to cover shit up. This was like, I don't see anywhere where they tried to cover anything up.
Yeah, and is that because Bob was somebody who was reverse engineering a craft, and there, you know, the government would have had kind of a hand in play because Bob was working on the craft versus Travis just got abducted, allegedly. And just to take a step back and talk about this abduction too, if I'm this superior being from whatever destination, I'm hovering in the woods doing whatever it is I'm doing. These hillbillies pull up in a truck after a long day of work. One dummy runs at me. Am I so sophisticated to the point that I only take one and just leave the rest, and I'm like, they probably won't notice if one of their guys is missing? Like, probably not. Like, the whole concept of what happened there, if I'm this species trying to remain silent and kind of, you know, run stealthily, why am I taking only one person in a group of 6?
Well, it could be that, you know, he was the only dumbass that walked towards the ship, right? Maybe they had like a buffer zone, you know, as long as you stay outside of this radius, we can give 3 shits if you saw us or not, because no one's going to believe your ass anyway. But we have Travis, who felt this impulse to walk towards the light and investigate this craft further. You know, I mean, I've done some pretty impulsive things in my life, but I don't think walking towards a foreign vehicle, vessel, spacecraft floating that you've only seen in science fiction movies
Can't be towards the top of the list.
No. Now, if there was, you know, maybe some other things, like they're passing out garage beer or something, maybe I'd walk towards that light.
Good chance.
Very good
Especially
chance.
if it's on a football Saturday or Sunday.
Absolutely. All right, so Brian, we discussed, what are your thoughts on the old Travis Walton abduction?
I think this is the classic story of a money grab. It's interesting when we talk about the forestry piece. I think there's some reasons to believe that that group of guys needed an event to happen so they wouldn't miss their contract date. I think that's convenient. I think it's convenient that there's no evidence to corroborate any of this story outside of the lie detector. I think Travis has manufactured an elaborate story, and maybe he is telling the truth. It's just his tale of abduction, and maybe I am biased because I've seen Fire in the Sky and watched that movie, and I was just like, oh my God, like, this is aliens. We're in trouble. I just, between those pieces and then what I just talked about with, why would they only take one guy and leave the rest? I just don't buy it. I don't like the way that Travis interviews and constantly steers off topic while telling his story. For me, there's not enough skin in the game to say that this is legit. I think it's a fun thing to talk about. Do I think there's reality to it? No, I'm not buying Travis's story.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm not I'm not buying it either. I know he went through like the hypnosis thing, and even Rogan brought up a really good point there that, you know, when you're under being hypnotized, you can have you can basically learn a fabricated truth, right? Like there is some deviation there or some things that could potentially take place to where, you know, if I'm hypnotizing you, I can get you to believe, and then when you wake up, now it's like your reality. When in real reality, it's not. It's just a fabricated story that somebody put in your mind. Now I can see what would have been really interesting is it had that that hypnotist, whatever, was with the APRO. It was that group or that specializes in investigating alien abductions or sightings and stuff like that. So, yeah, I agree with you, man. I think there's just too many holes, too many there's no tangible other than the lie detector test and 6 people saying this is what they saw. Everything beyond that, from like the 5 days of Travis's story, to me is could potentially be BS. And I'm not calling the guy a liar, but I can't get on board with it, especially when he's being interviewed and he's asked a very specific question, and then he deflects and starts talking about something else. Well, either you're trying to keep your story straight in your mind, like you've rehearsed this story so many times that you have to tell it in a certain way, or you're going to get yourself confused. So when I'm watching that, he's being pressed on certain things, and I thought Rogan did a great job, asking these questions. But so Travis would say something, for example, well, I shouldn't say this, but I've seen there's 3 different types of saucers. Oh, well, when did you see these? Well, I was with Dana, and we, when I just got back home, and, so he's like not even answering that question, right? So it's almost like it's scripted. Like in his mind, he wants the interview to go a certain way so that he remembers how to answer these questions or how to tell a story.
Yeah. I would like to hear Travis's take, and maybe he's done this and I've missed it. Kind of correlating Bob Lazar and Travis Walton. Bob Lazar on the back end, when he has been asked, going back in time, would you still take on this project and would you still come forward with the story? And his answer is always, yes, I would have taken on the project, and no, I wouldn't have come forward with the story. He was like, that was the coolest job I could have ever imagined. And if I could go back in time, all I'd want to do is work on this advanced tech that's like magic. Travis, on the opposite end, and again, maybe this is just deep-seated trauma, but is just trying to interpret his story and what he maybe depicted as hostile during the time of his encounter wasn't. Like there's nothing that Travis is doing, and maybe that's situational, that makes me say, put some credence to what Travis is saying. And yeah, okay, I want to believe Travis. Bob on the back end says, I would have never said shit to anyone because I want to still be doing it. Travis is trying to interpret, and I can't decide if I'm deciphering his interpretation as I'm trying to figure out how I could have sold more books, more movies, or if his interpretation is really, I got abducted, I'm really suffering mentally, and I'm trying to piece together this all to tell myself a story to make it make sense.
I can see I can definitely go either way, right? He's made, I'm assuming, a couple $1,000s off of his.
That's a good question. I wonder what he has made.
I don't know. I have no idea. I never researched that.
He's probably not logging anymore. Anyway.
No, he's definitely not logging.
Yeah.
Hopefully he wasn't caught up with Bob and the prostitution ring and stuff. Maybe they're sharing strippers.
In cahoots.
Yeah, in cahoots. Yeah. All right, so what do you think Travis drinks?
Boy, that is a tough question. So I don't like him. My immediate out of the gate answer, just based on how Travis looks, and if you've never seen Travis and you're listening, Travis is like a scrawny, red-haired dude with a mustache. He looks like a red-haired version that hasn't worked out of the Marlboro Man. So I want to say Coors Banquet beer, but because I don't love Travis, I feel like he's got to be some kind of seltzer. He's probably a seltzer guy.
Mad Dog 2020.
Yeah, there you go.
Boone's Farm.
Yeah.
Something. I don't know, man. I think he's like straight, like hard whiskey.
I don't know.
Straight out of the bottle.
I don't know
either. All right, Tyler. Well, we appreciate your letter.
Thanks for writing in, man.
Yeah, we appreciate the recommendation on doing Travis Walton's abduction. I hope you guys found it interesting. I know I did, doing all the research. When you're listening to a podcast, obviously share with your friends, hit those likes.
Yeah. Keep your mind open, your eyes on the sky. You never know what might fly by.
And with that, we'll catch you on the next one.